An uninspiring first 40 minutes for the Florida Panthers, where the Leafs' depth scoring made them pay, and puck management continued to be an issue for the Cats. And with a late comeback effort, it was still too little, too late for the Cats. We're going to discuss that and more here on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Tuesday, April 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So the Florida Panthers lose to the Toronto Maple Leafs by a final score of 6-4 in regulation, and one where the Florida Panthers fell behind, got it to as much as one towards the end, but this game was lost for the Florida Panthers in the first 40 minutes, where it was uninspiring play, multiple turnovers in their, whether it's their own offensive blue line or on their breakouts, which led to open opportunities and chances in the net front for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that has resulted in this 6-4 loss for the Cats. But here to break down this game for the Florida Panthers and the Toronto Maple Leafs for tonight's result, he is a guest that you guys have heard and seen before. He is Florida Panthers and Marlins historian Francisco Oporta. Rough night, not only for the Panthers, but South Florida in general, my friend.
Do we have to do this show? I mean, can we just like pack it in and just be like, nah, tonight's not the night, man. Man, people are angry amongst the Cats fan base right now. There's a lot of worrying going on right now with about 7 games left here, and maybe they can repeat their efforts from last season where they went 6-0-1 in their final 7 games and kind of carry some actual momentum heading into mid-April. But there's a lot of questions here with regards to the Panthers and their play. It's been a long season now. We're towards the end, and there's a few things they got to figure out.
Yeah, and figure out, indeed, it really comes down to taking care of the puck and just using a late game situation and not waking up until the third period. And we saw that on Thursday when they faced off against the Islanders too. And just the fact that even on the power play for the Panthers, I mean, yeah, they had a power play that carried over into the second period, but you're thinking about the Panthers' inability to just have a whole bunch of zone time for them too, where the Maple Leafs were just hard on the puck. Got a credit to them, and just having a hard time re-entering the zone and just the amount of times that the Panthers have just been loose with the puck. Kulikov, especially on the first one, Matthew Nyes intercepts it, and they go on a breakaway to score. And one off a face-off where Barkov loses his edge. Brody feeds to Auston Matthews too, and it looked promising when the Florida Panthers brought it to 1. When Brandon Montour crossed up Samsonov, and then it happened again where you're a little loose in your end, and then the Maple Leafs quickly respond. I mean, it's a long enough stretch that it is starting to become a problem, Francisco.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that have been just not clicking as far as the team is concerned, and maybe there's some some fatigue with regards to the way that the Panthers play. This team is not really meant to put up 5-6 goals a night
Mm-hmm.
and be as flashy as the 2022 team. But we're starting to see the other end of playing these grindy games. Once other teams start playing along with you, sometimes you end up on the opposite end of this. And I think there's a lot of bad habits that have been creeping up on the Panthers lately, with regards to their play and some lackadaisical effort. I even recall from the last home game where Barkov was basically saying, yeah, we just got a lot of yelling at us during the intermission, and then we woke up and started playing. And that kind of felt the same way heading into the third, where suddenly this team looked completely different. Now, suddenly they looked as good as they had been before this stretch of, I don't know if you could call this mediocre play, but just out of character play from what we've seen over the course of the season. And the only I understand the panic in the Panthers fan base with regards to, is this a lingering thing that will head into April? Because there is a possibility it's either going to be Boston or Toronto. Now Toronto's only a few points behind the Panthers and
With a
could
game in hand.
yes, and could overtake them. And suddenly the Panthers are on the road to start game one of the quarterfinals. And maybe just maybe, in a sort of an optimistic view for myself, maybe the Panthers play better as the underdog. I'm just saying that maybe being the top team is not what they're used to. And it's, I'm just thinking of different ways to make this pretty, because this was not pretty 40 minutes into this game.
I mean, we could talk about prettiness as far as what happened in the third period, but I mean, if that third period doesn't happen as far as the domination, because I mean, you're not going to be seeing, if this is 2-2, you're not going to see the Leafs probably like laying back and just playing not to lose instead of trying to play to win. So that's where I really come at it with that point too. And you just think that the Panthers just got outworked at times. I mean, even though the Florida Panthers did have quite a few good shorthanded opportunities too on the night, they got as many shorthanded shots that they did on the power play. So it also goes to show the struggles on the power play too. But
Yeah.
and just,
I mean, they haven't
ahead.
scored a power play goal since what, the Flyers game, I think.
I believe so. It's been a bit.
It's been a while. I think it was Tarasenko that scored that one. So it's becoming a bit of an issue there as well. Just they really seem out of sync, out of character. Just some recalibration here. Maybe Montreal's the type of game, but I thought the last game against Detroit was the game that would wake them up and get them out of this funk that they're in right now. But there are some encouraging signs. I would say, hey, they've got this in them for this comeback streak. There were moments there. I think Rodriguez had one off the iron. There were so many opportunities for them to get to get closer earlier in that third period, and of course they were one goal back at a point. So there are moments that we can take from this and say, okay, these are positives. Let's take those 20 minutes and hopefully we can stretch that out over the course of 60 and get back to what we had done in the prior 20 games before this recent last 2 weeks of the season here. But Stolarx coming in relief, just a different look. Held it down for the most part there as well. So that's encouraging as always. But I'm not going to hang too much on Bob here too. There were some moments there that he was left out to dry. And I think as far as the prospect of facing this Maple Leafs team in the first round, it'll be a lot different. They have toughened up. They have a lot more grit to them. But I had posted on Twitter X, what do you want to call it, that hey, put a little scare into them, just a tiny bit. We'll keep those in the memory banks and save it for later, just in case that is the first round opponent. So some small positives, but I know we have to look at the negatives throughout this.
Yeah, still good to view big picture. And you talk about some of the guys who they added. I mean, Ryan Reeves created that turnover, disrupted that breakout by Dmitry Kulikov that had David Kemp right all over the doorstep, where Bob had multiple opportunities. It just came down to just winning and losing those battles, and just protecting the net front, which the Panthers did not do so well, and that's really what got them to this result too. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss our 3 stars, when we thought this game was won or lost, and encouraging signs of certain players who might be fitting more into the system. We're going to discuss that and more here on Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel is making it more exciting to get in on the action, because right now new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on the tourney, MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? So then you have to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Back on this second segment here on this Tuesday, April 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Tuesday. Here with Florida Panthers historian Francisco Oporta to recap this 6-4 loss for the Florida Panthers against the Toronto Maple Leafs in a big swing game that did not go in the Panthers' direction. And now it is, like Francisco said, the fan base is not too happy. I thankfully have not refreshed Twitter at all since the score went final. I usually stay away from the overreaction.
Don't go on Kirby's Spaces right now. I'm telling you that right now.
The only bad part about me and Kirby's work is that our work happens at the same time, so I can never tune in live. That's the only bad part
I
about
popped
that.
in just for about like those little 20 minutes or so after the game, just like, people are not pleased.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. But hey, he does a great job as far as like conducting a great conversation and knowing when to take turn,
giving people a space to vent more than anything else.
Open chat. But 3 stars of the game for this one. Matthews, Ilya Samsonov, and Matthew Knies. Why is Ilya Samsonov a star of the game, even though he gave up 4 goals, including 3 of them in the third period? Because there were the few times that the Panthers crashed the net that you just saw Samsonov on his right there on his back, waiting to get the whistle, and a lot of times he got the whistle too. But just the multiple times where he just came clutch, and even though, and like we said, you said earlier about the multiple times that the Panthers hit off the post on Erod, especially in the third period, where after the Florida Panthers scored, almost brought it to 2 at that time. But I gotta give Samsonov a star, even though he wasn't in the stars as far as the stars of the game for this one. And they gave Tarasenko a 3rd star. Actually, he's an honorable mention for me, because even though Carter Verhaeghe only played 2 shifts, I saw that he was really starting to fit in with that Lundell line, and they're outshooting the opposition 11-2 in the Detroit game on Saturday. So it seems that things are starting to get together as far as Vladimir Tarasenko fitting the system. So he's an honorable mention for me. How about you?
So, I mean, Matthews, 61 goals. I mean, my goodness gracious, right?
62. Empty netter.
62. Sorry. Yeah, he got the empty netter. Sorry. Yeah, I forgot about that one. But the other thing is with regards to Samsonov, that one save, the one that was around, I think it was in the first period, that just got on the line and he reached back and brought it back in and made the save and froze the puck. And if you look back at that play, that was all reactionary. I don't think he even saw where that puck was, but just as just a force of habit, reach back there, see if you grab something, and he just happened to do so. Because if that puck had just hit that post, it probably does go in, and possibly, I think that it might have been when it was 2-1 at that point, or even 3-1, but a 2-2 game at that point, or a 3-2 game, and suddenly this is a completely different hockey game that we're talking about. The entire dynamic changes. But then the Leafs got on the roll, and the Panthers had to come back in the third, and it fell short. As far as Vladimir Tarasenko, I'm liking the acquisition. I like a shooter that shoots. I think that's one of the things that Vladimir Tarasenko is not afraid to do, is shoot when he's got the opportunity to do so. And he almost saved that last. He kept that puck from going out in that last portion when the Leafs got the empty netter at the end with Matthews.
Great
He
effort.
kept it in, and he just didn't know where the puck was. It was just right under him, under his feet, and just unfortunately he couldn't hear anybody else and didn't know where it was there. And then the game was over from there. So that, I think, Vlad Tarasenko, as far as if you had to give somebody on this Panthers team a star, it would go to him. He also factored in all the other the goals in that third period as well. So those are my 3 stars if I had to give any.
Yeah, got the redirection, kept the play alive while fighting off a check before he distributed to Sam Reinhart for goal number 52 for him. So now Reinhart is 8 away from breaking the record. Still unlikely in my opinion, but still never say never.
Just needs a hat trick tomorrow, that's all.
Yeah, just needs one. It is Montreal, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. But it's funny because you mentioned the part where you mentioned the chance by Sam Bennett in the slot, and that was on the power play too. And that is a good way to segue to when we thought this game was won or lost, was really that part. Even though it was so early with how quickly the Maple Leafs got the second goal for them, and the Panthers had an opportunity to just make it close going into the midway point of the first too. I mean, like we said, 3 power play opportunities to really have that chance to set the tone as far as that, and they couldn't get anything off of it. And there was another one also where Samsonov reached back off a feed from Evan Rodriguez. I thought Evan Rodriguez, as far as creating some chances, I thought he was pretty good as far as that third period too. That was that other one that he brought together. There was one where Matthew Tkachuk batted it twice, got it up and then in the air, trying to hit it into the net, and Samsonov was there too to make the stop. So I mean, God, I don't expect this in a 7-game series with Samsonov. I mean, we've seen enough of a sample size last year and even in Washington when he was there. But got to give him his flowers for the night. Your part where you thought this game was lost.
Well, this game was lost. Woof. Where do we start, right? The Robertson goal, that one hurt.
Huh, that early.
Yeah, it with the history of the team this past week or so, just these awful mistakes that they might seem a little boneheaded, they might be a little bit ticky-tacky in some ways. Just like, man, if you clean up just that little bit, you prevent something like that and leaving some guys out to dry. I think when you've been playing like this, when the Panthers have been playing like this for a few games now, it just snowballs into, oh, here we go again with this. And I don't think the team is the type that will hang their heads down and go from there. They're always working, always pushing from here. And I don't think Paul Maurice would ever let them get too into their feelings with this. But it's just a pattern of behavior over the last few games that just made me feel like, oh, this is not looking good.
Yeah, and I understand that mentality now that you put it that way, as far as when it rains it pours type of deal, when it comes to just one mistake continuously leading to another, and the Panthers, at least lately, an inability to just recover off of their mistakes, and just like you said even earlier, they're just, the way they're structured is not just to continuously come back from deficits. I mean,
they have the ability to do so.
Yes,
they
correct.
have the horses to do so, but the style of play that Paul Maurice wants them to do, it's not conducive to that. But they have the horses to make it happen. It almost happened tonight.
Yes,
but we don't want to rely on that.
Absolutely, and because you could you could definitely get in trouble. But thankfully, when the Panthers are, that record of when they go into third periods with leads is still just an incredible stat, and it comes down to pace. And the Panthers, they were just not able to set that pace for them, and it's continued to cost them some games since the early parts of March. So we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss more about what has been said, and there might be some hurt feelings tomorrow in Montreal. There might. So let's discuss that and more on in the third and final segment on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. And we're almost done with the regular season. And regardless of where the Florida Panthers are in the standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy contests. All you have to do is pick studs like Connor McDavid, Nikita Kucherov, Nathan McKinnon, Alex Ovechkin. If they'll record more or less their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Cats fans. You can win 100 times your money playing fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Third and final segment here on this Tuesday, April 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Tuesday. So injury update for Carver Hagee, only played 2 shifts. And Paul Maurice said that we'll know more about it tomorrow. It's on the second end of a back-to-back, where thankfully the Panthers this season are 6-0-1 on the second end of a back-to-back this season. So with that, Paul Maurice was also not really trying to give the team credit as far as their third period, kind of sending a message as far as this is unacceptable. This isn't something that you are going to continuously get away with. And there was something that Jessica Blaylock asked on the Bally broadcast after the game to Ed Jovanowski about what is the feeling when you get to this part of the season, even if you're struggling. And really, Jovo spoke about how you have to not look too far ahead, and having to be upbeat, and that there's a possibility, and that when you're not upbeat against teams like the rest of this road trip, like an Ottawa and a Montreal, who are not going to be in the postseason, it's about a disservice to the opponent too. So it's also about that mindset of just continuing to stay present in times like this. And chances are, Panthers, they've won 7 in a row against Montreal. 11 of their last 12. A lot of their games have been not close. Some of them 3-goal wins. So chances are there could be some hurt feelings tomorrow in Montreal based on how the Panthers how they finished versus how quick of a turnaround this is.
So I think it's good. It's good that they're on a back-to-back. They can kind of wash out the dirty taste of this game and just move on to the next one tomorrow. It's a a weaker opponent. I'm not saying that the Panthers will take the Habs lightly. And it's still an NHL team. They've got nothing to lose as far as that they're concerned with their season. So they'll play the Panthers hard. There's always some pride there with regards to that. But I think it's an opportunity for the Panthers to get back to working on their craft. This is something they've been trying to forge over the course of an entire season, this style of hockey, and they need to continuously try and implement it. Hopefully, maybe get a power play goal, get that going all over again, and then see from there. They have some beef with Ottawa. Well, they have beef with everybody, but in particular, Ottawa. So that might also, get a rise out of them and push them forward with that final game of the road trip. So I think just the quick turnaround and facing off against two teams in which they have the opportunity to work on the things that they've been struggling with and try and hone in those details before headed back home for the final games of the season.
Yeah, thankfully, the penalty disparity for the Panthers wasn't it was in their favor this time around. Just an inability, just unable to convert for the Panthers.
Chris Rooney did us some favors today.
It's funny because Panther Prairie also posted that Chris Rooney was refereeing this game as like an April Fool's joke. The moment they tweeted that, I checked scouting the refs, but I did not reply back saying April Fools. I'm like, you know what? Let them fool people. Let them have a little fun here. But as far as Brad Montour also spoke about how the mentality is for the Panthers. I'm gonna look this up real quick. Jameson tweeted it saying, "Oh, here it is." Quote: "It's good that we get to play right away. Watch that game. They can celebrate that one. We'll take what we can fix and carry it into tomorrow." Close quote. In a way, that quote is a little bit of a, all right, celebrate now, Toronto. We'll meet again. And like you said earlier in your statement about having that stored in your memory for if / possibly when they meet, because that's what it's looking like. I mean, Toronto plays Tampa on Wednesday, so big swing game for them too. That's going to be another one on a Panthers off day. So I kind of like. I'm not necessarily. I'm very pleased by that quote by Monty. After that, is just continuing to just, even though it's a bad stretch, still believing in what you got in that locker room.
Nothing about this team screams that, oh, it's in their heads now. They're completely out of it. They've gone through these stretches earlier in the season. This reminds me a lot about the early season. Actually, I even posted that with that Red Wings game. It just felt like one of those games where, man, these guys are doing a lot of things, a lot of positive things that would tell you, man, they should be winning some of these games, and they're just not. So, and it was always back in October, November, where it was one mistake, two mistakes that kind of unraveled the game just a tiny bit there. And I feel like we're in that same stretch again, where it's gone through ebbs and flows here, but I feel like it's the reason why I'm not in panic mode at this point. Well, they've already clinched their playoff spot. We're good there. They're going to face somebody in the first round, but in all honesty, if you asked any of the teams in the Eastern Conference that are currently fighting for a spot or have a spot, Would they want to face the Florida Panthers as their first round opponent? Like a lot of them would not prefer to do that. So, because the Panthers are not going to make it easy for them. That's going to be 6 or 7 games that are going to be the toughest games they might even face for a playoff run for any of those teams. But hopefully it's the Panthers that can get on that run in the future. It's a bad stretch. There's some things they're working on, but the mentality of the team, I don't question that at all.
And this is the thing. I believe people are more worried about who they would rather face in round one, as far as fan bases. When it comes to that, people would not want to face the Florida Panthers, but I think, at least in my experience of watching this team, I don't care who the Panthers play in round one, even if it's Tampa Bay, who has had their number in multiple playoff series. It's that when you, and I think it's a product of what they did as far as that run last year. But I believe now it's just getting ready for when that time does come, and just knowing that you know when to just get that game right. It's not right at this moment in time. Let's not forget, in 2022, 2 or 3 games before the season ended, the Panthers set a franchise record in their longest winning streak in franchise history at 13. Yeah, it was right before the Tampa Bay Lightning did end it, as far as that, but still the Panthers were going hot into that, and then they went cold. The Panthers, yeah, they went hot into the final 8 games where they went 6-1-1, and then they started off cold. So this isn't going to be a 100% indicator of also what's to come too when it comes to that. We just can't freaking predict it neither.
Things change in the playoffs. Officiating changes, the mentalities, mindset, everything changes. So the hope is that the good habits that they've developed over the season, this style of play that they've been doing the entire season, is just nothing changes. There's nothing about their style of play that they are changing to try and fit into the mold of the playoffs. They've been playing like that all season. It's worked. It's worked out. They're in a down period. They're allowed to have a down period, especially when you're at 99 points.
Yeah.
They've already clinched their spot. I think it's just a matter of finish out these 7 games, try and get past 100 points, at least try and lock down that second seed. So it's a slightly more comfortable experience. But I said it at the beginning, maybe there's a chance that the Panthers might prefer being the underdogs going forward, because that they seem to play that way, even though they've got the horses of a team that is not an underdog. So you're justified in your worries. I'm not saying that for anybody out there. Everybody that's out there screaming and like, what the hell is going on here? Completely justified, but I'm not pushing the panic button just yet.
Yeah, especially the few times that they have responded in the last week in Philly and against Detroit. But you want to see it, obviously you do want to see it more often against the top teams, where in the last week you're seeing regulation losses against the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But hey, still plenty of time to get things going for the Florida Panthers. But Francisco, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, even though it came in a loss for both the Panthers and the Marlins, unfortunately, on a night in South Florida. Tell everybody where they can find you and your work online, my friend.
So at FLA Cats History, I'm continuously posting forgotten Florida Panthers players' birthdays that people don't remember. It was UC Jokinen's birthday, by the way. So there you go. A nice player there. I've got merch. I've got stuff like this. This is nice and pretty if anybody wants one of these. And I'm also at Marlins History. I don't know if you want to go there right now. The Marlins set a franchise record for worst losing streak to start a season. So, but maybe they're just warming up. So we'll see. So that's where I'm at.
At least we got the Panthers, right? That's I'm gonna end it there. At least we got them. All right, man. Thank you so much once again, and And I will see you very soon, my friend.
Alrighty.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Francisco Oporta, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.